It was just past midnight when Eleanor Moore heard the first knock. She lived alone in a small two-story house on the outskirts of Portland. The wind outside howled, but this knock, it was deliberate. 3 soft, slow taps on the front door. Tap, tap, tap. Elena paused her movie and turned the volume down. Silence. Her cat, Misty, perked up and stared toward the hallway. Another knock came. Louder this time. Tap, tap, tap. She stood, her heart beating a little faster now. She wasn't expecting anyone, and the porch light had been broken for months. She tiptoed toward the door, phone in hand. Through the peephole, nothing, just darkness. She turned the deadbolt slowly, then cracked the door open, leaving the chain lock fastened. "Hello?" she called into the night. No answer, only the wind. She shut the door and double-locked it. 30 minutes later, Elena had just begun to calm down when she heard something else. Footsteps. Upstairs. Her breath caught. She lived alone, and no one had been up there since she moved in. At first she told herself it was just the house settling. Old beams, old floors, nothing unusual, but then another sound, a whisper. It was faint, almost like breathing, and it came from the guest bedroom upstairs. Elena grabbed a kitchen knife and her phone. She dialed 911, but her screen froze. No signal, just a spinning circle. "Misty?" she whispered, but the cat was nowhere in sight. She climbed the stairs slowly, one hand on the rail, the other clutching the knife. The door to the guest room was closed. It had been opened that morning. She reached out, turned the knob, and pushed. The room was empty, except for the mirror, the old mirror that had been there when she moved in, a tall, antique thing with a cracked wooden frame. She rarely looked at it. It always made her uneasy. And now it was fogged up like someone had been breathing on it. As she stepped closer, words began to appear across the glass, written in the fog by an invisible finger. "I never left." Elena stumbled back, heart pounding. She turned to run, but the door slammed shut. She screamed, banging on the door, but it wouldn't budge. Behind her, the whisper came again, louder, right by her ear. "I was here before you. I'll be here after." Suddenly, silence. Then, the sound of footsteps going down the stairs, and the front door unlocking. Someone, or something, was leaving. When she finally broke the door open, the house was empty. The mirror was clean, no writing, no mist. But every night since, Elena hears the footsteps. They never go upstairs again. They are always walking away, as if something else is living in her place now. His name was Liam, a former soldier from Ohio. He had come to the Appalachian Mountains to trade the cacophony of the city and the echoes of war for the deep, profound silence of the ancient wilderness. He'd been on the trail for weeks, his body aching with a good kind of fatigue, his mind finally blissfully quiet. He had learned the language of the forest, the rustle of a deer in the undergrowth, the cry of a hawk painting circles on the sky, the heavy stillness that fell with the dusk. Then the forest began to speak to him in a new language. It started with a small, strange object. Hanging from the branch of an oak tree, directly over the path, was an intricate spiral fashioned from bird bones and tied with black twine. Liam took it down, turning it over in his calloused hands. The craftsmanship was expert, but unsettling. He dismissed it as some local superstition, a piece of strange folk art left by a fellow hiker, and pushed onward. The next day he found 5 more. They were placed deliberately beside the trail, resting on mossy stones or tucked into the hollows of trees, all of them spirals. It felt as if someone was marking the path for him. That night, as he lay in his sleeping bag, he heard a sound that didn't belong to the nocturnal chorus of the woods. It was a sharp, dry clicking, like 2 stones being struck together. The sound wasn't distant, it was close, seeming to circle his small campsite, always just beyond the beam of his headlamp. Trained by the military to never underestimate a potential threat, Liam spent the rest of the night with his hunting knife clutched in his hand. The dread began to root itself in his gut, a slow-growing weed. It wasn't just the bone spirals anymore. He began to notice tracks running parallel to his own boot prints. They were almost human, but too long, too narrow. They were the prints of bare feet, somehow navigating the rough, rock-strewn earth with ease. He decided to leave the designated trail. Whoever's doing this is following the path, he reasoned. I'll cut through the woods. With his map and compass, he pushed east into the dense tangle of trees, but the forest seemed to resist him. Paths that should have led toward a service road somehow looped back on themselves. His compass spun erratically whenever he neared certain ancient moss-covered trees. The feeling of being lost began to morph into the feeling of being caged. The tipping point came when he found the deer. It hadn't been killed by a predator. It was arranged with a terrifying ritualistic precision in the center of a small clearing. Its legs were tucked neatly beneath it, and carved into its flank with a sharp, heated object was the same spiral symbol. Liam scanned the silent trees around him. The forest's silence was no longer peaceful. It was heavy, expectant. He finally understood. This wasn't a prank. He had stumbled into a territory, and its occupant was hunting. A thick, unnatural fog rolled in, rising from the valleys with alarming speed and swallowing the landscape. Visibility dropped to less than a few feet. The clicking sound started again. This time it was all around him. Close. So close. It was the sound of multiple things moving through the fog with him at the center of their tightening circle. Primal fear overrode his training. Logic and discipline dissolved in the face of this ancient terror. He ran. He ran blindly, branches whipping his face, his feet catching on unseen roots. He just ran, the clicking sounds following like a shadow he could not outrun. He burst, stumbling into a small circular clearing. The fog was thinner here. He stood, gasping for air, his heart a frantic drum against his ribs. And then he saw it. It stood motionless in the center of the clearing, the architect of the spirals. It was tall, impossibly thin, its limbs bending at angles that defied anatomy. Its skin was the color of gray bark, allowing it to blend almost perfectly with the surrounding trees. It had no face, no eyes, but Liam felt a gaze lock onto him, a feeling of being perceived with an ancient and malevolent intelligence. It was a nightmarish statue born of wood and bone and shadow. Liam was frozen in place. The trail, the symbols, the sounds. It had all been a careful, patient act of herding. He wasn't a trespasser, he was an offering, guided meticulously to the slaughter. The creature took its first step. The movement was impossibly fast, unnervingly silent. The dry, clicking sound emanated from its joints as it moved. Then the sound changed, rising in pitch until it became a deafening, piercing shriek that tore through the fog. Liam closed his eyes. In the final moment of his life, he didn't think of the war, or of the city he had left behind. He thought only of one simple truth. The old woods keep their secrets, and sometimes their secrets are hungry. Daniel Harper had just moved into his new apartment, a small one-bedroom unit in an old building in downtown Chicago. It was cheap. Too cheap, really. But Daniel didn't ask questions, he just needed a place to start over. The first few nights were quiet, cold, a bit creaky, but nothing unusual. Until the fourth night, around 2:30 a.m., Daniel woke up to a faint sound. Not outside, inside the wall. He sat up, trying to locate it. It was coming from the air vent just above his bed. At first it was static, like a radio far away, then a whisper, a voice, very soft, very low. "He's in your room." Daniel froze. He stared at the vent. The voice was gone. He laughed nervously, blamed it on a dream, and went back to sleep. The next night it came again, more clearly this time. "Don't move. He's watching." Daniel turned on the light instantly. The room was empty. The door was locked. He climbed onto the bed and looked into the vent. Just darkness. He called the building manager the next morning. "There's a weird sound coming from my air vent," he said, "like talking." The manager laughed. "Old pipes. Happens in winter." Daniel wanted to believe that, but the next night the voice changed. It wasn't a whisper anymore. It was his own voice, saying, "Why did you let me die?" Daniel's blood ran cold, because no one knew. No one knew what happened that night 5 years ago in college, and when he and his roommate were drinking near the lake. No one knew his roommate had drowned. No one, except Daniel. He stared at the vent, now shaking. "You left me there." His own voice again, distorted, broken, echoing from the vent. "I never left." Daniel ran to the kitchen, grabbed a chair, and unscrewed the vent cover. Inside there was no speaker, no wires, just an empty shaft leading into darkness. And then, a breath, warm, right on his face. Something was there, something real. Daniel screamed, fell backward, and the vent cover slammed shut on its own. Now, every night the voice returns. Sometimes it whispers, sometimes it laughs, sometimes it sounds like the roommate who drowned, and sometimes it just repeats one sentence. "I'm almost out."